So I don't want to overreact, but it might be time to hit the panic button on the Cincinnati Bengals, because things are just getting really ugly for them, man. They simply just don't look like the same team they've been in years past. Joe Burrow doesn't look like the same quarterback. The offensive line is absolutely atrocious. The defense also sucks. And even when your wide receivers are getting open, Joe Burrow doesn't have enough time to even get them the ball. Things are rough in Cincinnati. They're currently 1-3 and the worst team in the AFC North, and that's just not good enough, especially for a team that's coming off of playing in the AFC Championship game. Now, of course, the Bengals started this season 0-2, and I wasn't ready to hit the panic button quite yet because, of course, they started 0-2 last season, and like I said, they made it all the way to the AFC Championship game. So after starting 0-2, I wasn't sitting there with many worries. Then they came out in week 3 against the Rams in primetime and showed me a glimmer of hope and ended up beating them in what was not that impressive of a performance by the Bengals, but at the very least, a win's a win. So after week 3, like last season, I'm thinking that the Bengals are going to come into week 4 and bounce back. And they bounced back all right, but they bounced right back to being bad because they got absolutely blown out by the Titans 27-3.
Oh my God!
Nothing was going the Bengals' way this game, guys. Outside of really the opening drive, the offense wasn't able to get anything going throughout the day. Cincinnati started the game by driving down the field and kicking a field goal. They got all the way down there and it was 4th and goal from the 3, but they just decided we're not going to go for it and we're just going to take the points. Looking back, they probably should have kind of gone for it because they didn't end up scoring another point for the rest of the game. It was that bad. Now, as much as I'm going to talk about the offense later in this video and their problems, this game was 100% a defensive flop. The Titans scored on 5 of their first 6 possessions and just controlled the game throughout the entire span of it. Now, of course, it is worth noting that Derrick Henry looked like his old self, running for 112 yards in a touchdown, but man, the Bengals defense just looked bad. And it's not like the Titans offense did anything that crazy in this game either. I mean, the bulk of their points were scored in the second quarter, and then for the rest of the game, they didn't really do much. But still, man, if your offense is going to play as bad as the Bengals offense did that game, the defense really needs to step up because they looked practically non-existent in this game. Now on to probably the biggest problem of this team, the offense. It is a huge problem. Nothing's really clicking for the Bengals offense this year. Joe Burrow finished the game 20 of 30 for 165 yards. And of course, 73 of those yards were to Jamar Chase because nobody else had more than 26 yards. Still, the offense only being able to put up a single field goal in the game, especially with an offense like the Bengals, which is known for their explosive plays and just being able to put up points, it's kind of embarrassing, honestly, because it's really not like the Titans have been that impressive of a team this year. Theoretically speaking, the Bengals should have been able to win this game, but they came out and just looked flat. Now, the Bengals' offensive struggles aren't really anything new. This is something that's been happening all season long. In week 1, the Bengals faced off against the Cleveland Browns, and they just got absolutely bitched. I would have loved to see the Bengals win that game, but honestly, it was kind of karma because Jamar Chase was talking a ton of shit before that game. He called the Browns the Elves a couple of times and was just clowning the team.
It's just the hooping and hollering about the Cleveland Browns. I was about to call them the Elves. If you ask me, I don't really pay attention to it because it's Cleveland is Cleveland.
So for the Browns to come out and kick the Bengals in the teeth and kind of take that dub in week 1, it felt like karma had caught up to Jamar. The Bengals got crushed 24-3. I think probably one of the saddest stats from that game is that the Bengals offense had a total of 142 yards on the day, and Nick Chubb had 106. So the Browns running back nearly had as many total yards as the Bengals did on the entire day. Much like week 4 against the Titans, the defense just couldn't stop the Browns, and the offense just couldn't move the ball. Burrow was just 14 of 31 with 82 yards. Yes, the starting quarterback didn't even throw for 100 yards in this game. It was really ugly, man, and it came after a bunch of questions in the offseason of if Joe Burrow was truly healthy after suffering that calf strain that he did in camp. Now, I'll get back to that later in the video, but safe to say, it definitely has affected him to some degree. Jamar Chase only had 39 yards in the game, and the offense just wasn't doing anything productive. They even pulled their starters later in the game game because they were getting beaten so bad. The fact that a team that had just made the AFC Championship the year before pulled their starters in week 1 because they were losing so bad is just a complete embarrassment, dude. But man, this team has a lot of problems. After a brutal loss in week 1, they went on to have another AFC North matchup in week 2 against the Baltimore Ravens, and they lost this game too. Now, this game was a lot closer, ending 27-24, but still the Bengals offense didn't look that good. The offense was better, but the bar really wasn't that high after week 1. The offensive line, again, absolutely sucked. It's really killing this Bengals team, if I'm going to be honest with you. Well, the game was close since he was down 10 points twice in the second half, so Baltimore definitely controlled this game. And again, their top star wide receiver was pretty quiet. It was another down game for Jamar Chase with just 31 yards, and T. Higgins was actually the top wide receiver on the day with 89 yards and 2 touchdowns. T. Higgins actually had their only 2 offensive touchdowns of the game. The only other one came from an 81-yard punt return touchdown that the Bengals had. So even to keep it close, the Bengals essentially had to rely on a miracle for that to happen. Now, statistically speaking, the game was close, and Baltimore's a good team, especially when they're healthy. But after 2 losses, you got to sit there and wonder what went wrong with this team. Like I said earlier, they made the AFC Championship after starting 0-2 last season, so really wasn't going to make too big of a deal there. The first 2 weeks of the season, they played the Browns and the Ravens, both of which have top 10 defenses in the league. They were playing good defenses, so it made sense why there were struggles, but I don't think we've seen struggles like this in Cincinnati since, the Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow thing has started. Now, Cincinnati, and especially Jamar Chase, turned it around in week 3 when they played the Los Angeles Rams on Monday Night Football in primetime. They ended up winning the game 19-16, and Jamar Chase just absolutely came out and showed up. He had 141 yards. Dude was definitely playing well. Burrow had 259 yards and a pick, but no touchdown. They got the win, and that's the most important thing about the game of football, is getting wins. But it was still an ugly game for the Bengals. Like, it wasn't this crazy impressive win that's gonna make me forget about the terrible play in week 1 and week 2. The down play for the Bengals was very much still on my mind following this win. And then following week 4, my worries about this team were just amplified. Now, there's a lot of problems with this team this season, but let's start with what's probably the biggest one, Joe Burrow. If you've been paying attention to the Bengals from this offseason, you know that Joe Burrow reportedly suffered a calf strain in camp, and that kept him out of camp for a while, and it felt like they really downplayed the severity of this injury to Joe. We didn't hear anything about him in the preseason. He wasn't talking to the media. Clearly, he was just rehabbing this injury, getting ready to go for week 1, and eventually he was ready to go for week 1. At least we all thought he was, but man, he just doesn't look the same. Joe Burrow's calf issue is still a huge problem for this team. You could just tell in week 1 that he wasn't the same. He looked like shit. He couldn't move around the pocket, and that's a huge issue when your offensive line is basically glorified traffic cones. Joe Burrow isn't able to extend plays right now, which is something that he needs to do with how bad the offensive line is, and right now he's essentially a one-read quarterback. The Bengals offensive line has been so freaking bad week in and week out. Like, it's impressive to watch. The offensive line constantly crashes in on Joe Burrow this season, and he can't move. He's dead ass a statue in that pocket. And when your offense in the past has totally relied on your wide receivers having one-on-one opportunities and having Joe Burrow lob the ball downfield and having those wide receivers make the play, when your quarterback is under duress immediately, it's not going to happen. Joe Burrow is not going to be able to get the ball down the field because he's simply not given enough time to. Joe Burrow just looks really, really bad. And that's not something that I thought I would say, especially after how he started his career. Joe Burrow has looked pretty good throughout the entire tenure of his career, but this season just feels different. I don't know what it is. Joe Burrow just got that absolute bag of a contract, and now he doesn't even look nearly like the same player. As a matter of fact, he's been one of the worst quarterbacks in football through the first 4 weeks of the season. It's hurting the wide receivers' production, and it's honestly hurting the run game too. Joe Mixon hasn't even been able to get much down on the ground either. His season high right now is 67 yards, and when you take that into account, the Bengals just can't move the football. But if we thought things were bad over the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season, things are only going to continue to get worse with the injury of T. Higgins. Now, Jamar Chase is your one. There's no doubt about that. He is the guy. But having T. Higgins on your team is a huge boost. Dude is also a stud that gets mad production when Jamar Chase is taking all the attention. And I guess we do have to see whether or not he tries to play through it or not. But if he is out, that's just a killer blow to the Bengals offense, which is already struggling every single week to put up points. I feel like I also got to add this in. Zach Taylor as a play caller is suspect. He's not really that creative, and the offense just feels really simple. And that's okay, because in the past, it's worked. You've gotten lucky. You've gotten these one-on-one opportunities with Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. They've been able to go on a go route, and Joe Burrow's just been able to lob that bitch up, and somehow, some way, the wide receivers are going to do all the heavy lifting and come down with that ball. But this season just hasn't felt the same as prior seasons. Those opportunities are not coming as often as they would hope, and even when they do come, Joe Burrow is immediately under pressure, and with that calf injury, dude's not moving. He's going to stick in there and try to get the ball downfield, but 9 times out of 10, dude's getting hit when he throws the ball, so it's going to be an inaccurate throw. It's just bad all the way around. They got a bad offense right now, and the defense is also really bad. It's a huge difference from last season with no Jesse Bates or Von Bell, and the defense this year truly just feels like a shell of its old self. Maybe in years past, the Bengals would be able to get away with having a lackluster defense, but when their offense is playing as bad as they've been playing this season, your defense needs to step up, and they simply just don't have the pieces to do that right now. If the Bengals don't do something soon, if they don't do something immediately, this could be a very, very long season for them, especially if you can't score or stop anybody, because it's not like they've played the very top end of talent in the NFL either yet. Now, of course, I'm sure some Bengals fans out there, and honestly, even me, are waiting for this Bengals team to turn it around. They did it last year, but last year just felt different, man. Because even last year, while they were dropping games and it wasn't the prettiest, you still could tell that this team had the bones to be something great. They really haven't looked great at all this season. Really, nobody has. Right now, this looks like a bad team, and as long as Joe Burrow is hurt, it's gonna be a disaster. Now, I know a lot of people hate blaming all these problems on the Joe Burrow injury, and it's true, Joe Burrow has had some flukes that definitely aren't because of the injury, but I'm sure it doesn't help at all. Like I said before, he's really not moving around in that pocket too much, and he's looking for open receivers, but within the 2 seconds that he's given to throw the ball, they're not really getting that open. They really need to figure out all these issues by their bye, or really, this season could be over super fast. They play 2 more games until their bye. They play the Cardinals in week 5 and Seattle in week 6. Now, on paper, the Bengals should beat the Cardinals. The Bengals should beat the Cardinals, but the Cardinals have been playing well above expectation while the Bengals have been playing well below. Do they meet somewhere in the middle and it becomes somewhat of a competitive game? Who really knows? But the Bengals should beat the Cardinals. Then they play the Seahawks, who have looked pretty damn solid this year, especially if everyone can stay healthy. If the Bengals don't turn something around soon, they're going to drop that game against Seattle. And if you go into your week 7 bye 2-4, the season looks super ugly. It really doesn't help though that coming out of that bye, things get pretty damn tough. Directly out of the bye, they're at the 49ers and then versus Buffalo. Both of those teams have been humming lately, and if the Bengals don't figure something out, they're going to drop both of those games. 49ers might be the best team in football right now, and Buffalo's just been kicking everybody they've played in the teeth for the past 3 weeks. I know Buffalo had some questions after their week 1 game against the New York Jets, but they have figured it out. Something has flipped in that team, and they're winning games by 3-4 scores. It's incredible. And honestly, if you don't figure things out by then, I just feel like you got to shut down Burrow. If Burrow is still struggling to move around the pocket, if he's not making things happen and this team is just struggling, you got to shut him down. You got to throw him on IR and give Jake Browning the reins to let him heal. I know Bengals fans don't want to hear that, because if that happens, your season's a wash at that point. Jake Browning's not doing anything with this roster, but you got to let him heal, because if this injury is going to cause this season to be an absolute wash, might as well let him heal and get ready for next year. Best case scenario, if that does happen, is you're able to get something for T. Higgins at the trade deadline. It's pretty clear that he's not a part of their future plans. I know the rib injury does hurt. We don't really know how severe or not severe that injury is, but clearly T. Higgins is up for discussion on the trade block. Hopefully for a caliber of receiver like T. Higgins, you can land a top 10 pick and then probably replace him with a stud wide receiver from the draft like Emeka Egbuka or Xavier Worthy. Probably not going to land a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. If they did, they would have had to be really, really bad. And I'm hoping that's really not the case, especially because this team shouldn't be that bad. But at this point, who really knows? They just haven't looked the same. If that happens and the Bengals are really bad this year, you got to be smart with that pick and try to regroup and try again next year. It's not the thing that Bengals fans want to hear, especially coming off of an AFC Championship game. But I don't know, there's something off about this team this year. I don't know, I kind of feel like it's somewhat similar to what happened to the Chiefs in 2021 early on. It felt like other teams had kind of caught up to the Chiefs offense, but like we all know now, they adjusted and kind of ended up humming throughout the rest of the season. The Bengals need to adjust something. Anything. I don't know. That offensive line, I would say, is probably the biggest reason for their failures so far. If you have a quarterback that's not going to be able to move around the pocket, you simply cannot have an O-line that gives him less than 2 seconds to throw the ball, especially when the bulk of your offensive production comes from the down the field play of your wide receivers and one-on-one coverage. If your recipe for success is your wide receivers getting that one-on-one and going down the field and making a play for you, you're simply just not going to move the ball a lot this season because Joe Burrow can't get the ball downfield in time. The O-line being bad hurts everybody. Hurts Joe Burrow, hurts Joe Mixon, hurts the wide receivers, and it just hurts the offense altogether. The offensive line is killing drives for this Bengals team, and simply put, causing them to lose games. It's been ugly, guys, and honestly, it's kind of hard to see after how well they played last season. Clearly, there's some frustration starting to boil up in that locker room with Jamar Chase coming out and saying that he's open all the time. Now, of course, that's a bit of a stretch. Jamar Chase is not open all the time, but he is open a lot of the time. But like I said, it all boils down to the bad offensive line. It's an off year right now. It feels like there's something off about this team. I don't feel a need to hit the panic button right yet, but give it a couple more weeks and maybe we can have another conversation about that. Because man, the Bengals just aren't the same. Thank you guys for watching this video and making it all the way to the end. If you guys enjoyed this one, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on that bell notification so you never miss an upload by us. And if you want, go ahead and follow us on our personal socials if you want more things J&D. Appreciate you guys for watching this one. Thank you guys for everything. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.